get started. Let's start with router on the stick, right? So first and foremost, let's just log into this router right here. And router on a stick uses virtual interfaces called sub interfaces. Hostname R1, just so that we can see it, right? And let's see which interface we're going to use as the LAN facing interface. Let's use G00 as a LAN facing interface. G00. And here's another thing. This takes a little bit of planning, but since we're just labbing and playing around, we don't necessarily need to plan this, right? But what we're gonna have here is, this is gonna be VLAN 10 and this is gonna be VLAN 20. So you can, if you want, to align your sub interfaces with the naming convention of the VLANs, which I like to do. I'm gonna use this sub interface, or create this sub interface, to kind of like demarcate VLAN 10, or where this is where VLAN 10 is going to be connecting. And that's preferably the way that I like to do it. It has no functionality, right? Meaning this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have VLAN 10 under this sub interface. You can have VLAN 20 under here, or VLAN 30 under this sub interface. But the naming conventions are just the naming conventions. But what does matter is this, right? Encapsulation.1Q10. That's essentially going to be telling the router that VLAN 10 is under this sub interface, right? So you do that. IP address, we're gonna do 192.168.1.254. I like to use that for routers sometimes. More and more each day, I like to use the last IP address, reserve the last IP address for the routers. And we go ahead and we could issue a no shut, but it doesn't matter because the physical interface is shut down. And because the physical interface is shut down, the sub interfaces are shut down as well. So the sub interface up status or connection status is tied to the physical interface status in some way, right? So if the physical interface is down, the sub interface is going to be down as well, right? So let's set up the next one. G00.20, right? And encapsulation.1Q20, right? And then now we need to enter an IP address, or assign an IP address. 192.168.2.254. It's going to be a separate subnet. And by now you should know that separate VLANs require separate subnets. But subnets are not equal to VLANs. VLANs are a layer 2 concept and subnets are a layer 3 concept, right? Just put no shut if you want, doesn't really matter, but this is what really matters. And watch, no shut, and it brings up all three of the interfaces, including the sub interfaces that we have right here, right? So now what do we do next? Now we can start connecting up the router and the switch together, right? So we're gonna get a straight through cable because these are differing devices. And you could just connect this with that. And then we're gonna go into the command line for this and just start doing the configurations for the switch, right? So interface G01, switch port mode trunk. And I think you could do switch port trunk encapsulation dot 1q. I believe that's the command. Switch port. Switch port encapsulation dot 1q. Let's see. Switch port. I think you could just. I think trunk is fine. I guess it's already gonna be trunking. Let's check. Let's do show. Can I do show trunk? I totally forgot these commands, to be honest. Do show. Do show int trunk. Is that it? Yeah, that is it. See, this is why I do these labs, to stay fresh. But eventually figure it out, right? So it shows that it's trunking on G01. Trunking mode is on, not auto. I'll show you in a second the difference. Boom, native VLAN 1, right? Not really gonna do all the other fancy stuff because again, we're kind of pressed for time, but I figured I'd hop on real quick. So if you do this, right? Let's go int G01 and you do switch port mode dynamic auto. It's still going to be trunking, but it shows that it's negotiated. That's what that N means. Again, this is vital, so pay attention to this. This stuff is vital. So it's an auto and the status is trunking because on the other end, the router side, it's trunking. It's in the trunking mode, right? So let's just let's go back here. Switch port mode trunk. I prefer to put it in static trunking mode. And now let's set up the VLANs. We're gonna set up VLAN 10 and 20. VLAN 10, that's one way to create it. Name, let's just put data, let's call it data 1. And then if we want to create VLAN 20 in another way, right, other than explicitly configuring it, we can just do this. I'm going to set these interfaces to be in VLAN 20, right? So I'm going to enter into these interfaces. Int range FA0. Let's do FA012 to 24, right? Switch. You should ideally do switch port mode access. Switch port access VLAN 20. Now it says access VLAN does not exist, creating VLAN 20. Those are two ways to create VLANs on Cisco switches, right? So you just learned something right there. And now you can just put, you can go into VLAN, name it data 2. Yeah, we might not get to the VoIP stuff. I'll save that for probably tomorrow. You know, set probably a precedent for labbing as quickly as possible. I'm over here sweating because I just came in from outside exercising. I should have grabbed some water, but I didn't. So excuse me if I'm slow. All right, so now we created the two VLANs. Oh, that's what I forgot. Let's create a DHCP pool in the router. DHCP server in the router. IP DHCP pool. Let's do one for VLAN 10. Network 192.168.1.0. This is the range that it's going to be in. And we're going to put default router 192.168.1.254 and DNS server. I think we should do this. IP DHCP, I think it's excluded address. 192.168.1.254. DHCP, I forgot the command. I think it's, is it hyphen? Again, this is why I do these labs so often. right? Okay, cool. So basically I did this because I didn't want the DHCP server handing out this IP address and causing a conflict, because that's reserved for the router, right? I think that's how the experts do it. I'm just following what I think they do, right? So now let's create the next DHCP pool. DHCP pool VLAN 20. So this is the pool name right here, VLAN 20, right? Now, network 192.168.2.0, and then we do default router 192.168.2.254. This is the default gateway. DNS server 1.1.1.1. I believe that's Cloudflare. And then we can always do this: IP DHCP excluded address 192.168.2.254. I believe that's the way that it's done. The pros do it, right? So now we'll connect everything up. Oops, what did I? Yeah, let's do this. Oops. I didn't set up the ports for the VLAN. That's what I did. I would have been over here cussing Packet Tracer. Anytime anything goes wrong in my labs, I always blame Packet Tracer. So be on the lookout for that. Packet Tracer is a wonderful tool, by the way. I just like to blame it for everything. Okay, so let's set up these interfaces. I think I did to 11, right? 11, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 20. All right, so those are in VLAN 20. So now let's turn on DHCP. And that is how you set up router on a stick. Inter VLAN routing. Let's see if it got its DHCP settings yet. Probably not yet. It's still waiting to come up. Is this how you set up? This is how you set up router on a stick, right? In my haste, I didn't explain why we need inter VLAN routing. So remember I said that VLANs are a layer 2 concept and subnetting is a layer 3 concept. Since VLANs are a layer 2 concept and switches only deal on layer 2, they can't route packets between subnets that are nested inside of the VLANs. So we need a router. And the reason why they call it router on a stick, I guess, is because it looks like a stick right here, I guess, I think. So now what we're gonna do is, let's do a ping to prove, right? Because these are in 2 separate VLANs. As you can see, they're in 2 separate VLANs, 2 separate subnets. No, they're not. I screwed something up. What did I screw up? I screwed something up. Of course I did. I screwed something up in my haste, going too fast. This is supposed to be in... Oh, I put it in VLAN 20. What a boob. See, going too fast. Okay, so let me go back in interface. I'll just do this. Let's fix that real quick. See, gotta troubleshoot on the fly. So when this comes back up, I'm gonna get the right IP addresses. Being a boob. All right, so let's see which IP address this has. We're gonna do a ping across the VLAN. So this is why you have to configure and verify. There's many different ways to configure and verify, but that was one way I verified, by checking the default gateway and the DHCP settings that it got from the router, the DHCP server. So let's check. It's probably sending the discover message. Yep, there we go. Now we got it, right? So what IP address? This is 2.1. Let's ping from this subnet over to the next subnet. Ping 192.168.2.1. There we go. So we was able to ping over to the next subnet. Now, you might be wondering why this timed out. This timed out because the PC had to send an ARP request to discover the MAC address of its router in order to send it through this layer 2 switch right here. So that's essentially why we need route on a stick, right? This is from VLAN. This is VLAN. Let's do some colors, right? This is VLAN 10, right? And this right here, let's pick a random color. Blue. This is VLAN 20. So when VLAN 10 wants to communicate with a host in VLAN 20, it has to send the packet to the default gateway, right? Goes up, comes down, and goes to the host, right? That's how it has to be. It can't do this. It can't come up here to the switch and come down here unless it's a layer 3 switch.